Hi all, let's have a look at game 16 of the amazing set of games that DeepMind sent me recently. So this is Stockfish 8 against Alphazero, D4. It's under T-set conditions, so the opening book is set as actually the King's Indian defence, and actually we see the Simish variation in particular with F3. Black castles, bishop E3, C5, and now this is a gambit, but it's avoided here. Knight G E2, Knight C6, D5, Knight E5, Knight G3, so protecting the C4 pawn, which was attacked. E6, and this transposes the pawn structure into kind of modern Benoni territory. So if we look at the pawn structure here, this is still in book, and here now, after C takes, is the end of the book. In the Benoni, one of the trump cards, or you could call it a friend that you have, if you're playing with the black side, is the pawn majority. That's your friend here, the pawn majority, to kind of try and leverage. Also, the dark squares are generally quite pleasant for black. Now, for white, D6 is often the target, and often, F4 is dangerous for breaking through of E5. So, Alphazero here plays H5. Now, this can transpose into really bog standard stuff. Potentially. Usually the most common move is A6, trying to accelerate the pawn majority immediately. White clamps down, and now H5, for example, this continuation where black is playing for H4 and then F5 here. So this is an interesting position. However, in this game we have H5 immediately, and now white castles, and black can go to the trodden paths here still with Knight H7 by transposition, just a slightly different move order. So Queen D2, for example, H4, and then we're back to F5 as an example. However, after castling, instead of Knight H7 going back to the beaten paths, Alphazero prefers H4 immediately, and after Knight H1 again, here Knight H7 can have the potential to transpose back. So Knight H7 again, and we're back to the beaten path. But here Alphazero prefers to play for the form pawn. Yes, the power of the form pawn. Why is it good here? Is the form pawn, like a pawn majority, a friend of ours on the chessboard? And can our friends work together in some subtle ways, new undiscovered ways? Can our friends collaborate? That's a very interesting, perhaps philosophical question. It's like a goal hanging pawn, a default opportunity. If you work in IT systems, it's like setting up the defaults. They're vital because people don't usually change the defaults. It's got a default capability of assisting in mating patterns, and it's left here with G3. And please see the description for form pawn t-shirts. It's, for me, the most iconic chess concept that's been exemplified in many games I've seen of neural networks this year. And yes, we can call it perhaps a friend of ours, but there's another friend here, the 3-2 pawn majority. Can these friends work together? That's the key question. And meanwhile, if white's given time, Knight F2 controls G4. So this knight's looking a bit stranded, potentially. Especially with F4 kicking it back. Once we have F4 kicking the knight back, where's the knight going? And then there might be bishop F3 and then E5 to come after that. We see here bishop D7 for the moment, which gives the knight less escape square back. It's taking away the D7 escape square, but it supports B5, which in turn supports Knight C4. We have Rook C1. Now here, F4 is pretty harmless. Black can use that G4 square with advantage. Getting into that G4 is very undesirable. Black's dark square control and influence is emphasized. This is just very pleasant. In fact, black could get a massive advantage with one little slip like this. Everything's working together. The dark squares are working together with the pawn majority very well, and the white center collapses. So white's got to be careful about not routinely playing F4. So Rook C1 is played. Now we have B5, which gives the knight C4 here. So Knight F2 is not exactly threatening F4 because there's Knight C4 now. But you might wonder, hold on a sec, this pawn can be taken by two different pieces. Black gets a bit of counterplay, a little bit like a Banco Gambit style. So for example, knight takes, perhaps queen b8, for example, is interesting. Now this is a very dynamic, aggressive continuation of the knight sack. And it's a little bit murky actually. It seems as though white might be doing okay. It's a little bit double-edged. There's also, if we look at bishop takes b5, again, this is plausible. It seems as though black gets some pressure though, and maybe even can get back a pawn. But white ends up maybe with a small edge, but it's nothing to write home about. So knight f2. And now we have rook e8. So for the moment, f4 can be responded to with knight c4. We have white playing king h1 here. In this particular position, now that the rook's interrupted by the knight from f3, okay, it's a bit more pressure on the form pawn, but if knight takes, then there's simply knight takes f3 check, distracting the bishop away from b5. Black would be doing very nicely there. On f4, there's knight c4 as mentioned. So even though the knight's controlling g4, the knight is supported by that pawn, and this is at least even, this position. So we have king h1. And now b4, knight b1. There's no time for much else. If f4, b takes, and unfortunately for white, there's c takes hitting the rook. So this can't be ignored really. This is just better for black. So the knight goes back. And if we talked about friends or trump cards or strategic advantages or whatever you call them, but if we for the moment, for the sake of this game, let's call them friends. We've got friends on the dark squares. We've got a friend in terms of the form pawn. We've got a friend in terms of the pawn majority. And we've also got another kind of friend, an unprotected piece or pawn. We can consider that as a little friend as well. Can all these friends work together to create something new and special here? So these are our friends on the chessboard. The classic Benoni trump cards or friends, dark square play, pawn majority. We've added a form pawn to the mix. And there's an incredible move here played by Alphazero, which maybe, in my view, in a way, brings a lot of those friends, those ingredients together, working in extreme coordination with each other. And that's one of the beauties of chess. We think we know things, but to actually understand how things work together, you know, like ant colonies, you might understand an ant, but when you look at colonies, they somehow work differently in a more sophisticated manner that is difficult to observe in isolation. But here we have multiple elements sort of coming together in some weird, unexpected way. So can you guess what black plays in this position? Okay, if I give you 5 seconds, pause the video. Okay, it's like a real stunner of a move. Knight eg4. Okay, in one respect, you know, there's a potential for this bishop to hit the b2 pawn in the background. There's a potential for these pawns to play a role as a pawn majority in endgames. There's some potential for this form pawn to be helped with a route to sort of pass the ball to the goal hanger pawn via this diagonal sometimes, if this diagonal's weakened, if we look at this diagonal. So this is a staggering move. Why play here? Now, if a routine move like a4, then f4 is going to be knight g4. This way of playing things is not very good at all for black. This is just going to be fine for white. White's just material up. There's not enough here. The form pawn actually drops. The pawn majority is just fixed here. It's not really a great advert for these guys. So we have this move though is, yeah, it's a lot more interesting. We have f takes g4. If it's ignored, let's just look for the sake of argument. If it was ignored, then knight takes and knight h7 hits b2. If that's protected, then bishop d4, and we're celebrating the dark squares here. And now f5, we're celebrating this diagonal trying to use this diagonal in relation to the form pawn, and black's getting a small edge here. So okay, so let's go to the crunch. It's taken, and it's taken by the pawn here. If it's taken by the knight, so let's say knight takes, then knight takes here, rook takes e4, hits the bishop, clearly, and the bishops are a bit loose here, tactically actually. So even if the queen protected this bishop, it can just pile up. If once that bishop moves, then there's rook takes e2, and any rook f3, there's bishop takes g4. So if the bishop moves immediately, bishop takes. This position there's a skewer to bear in mind, and this should be at least equal. There's nothing to write home about here. You can see it's very, very dangerous position indeed, with that form pawn coming in, like on this diagonal, being assisted. Then bang, for example, yeah, it's not good. So f takes g4 is the critical test, and we have knight takes e4. So what has happened here? What is the meaning of this? Well, white took on e4. You might think, what about taking this form pawn here? Knight takes h3. It turns out here, knight takes g3 check, rook takes e3, and then we've got two pawns hanging, b2 and g3. If we protect g3 here, queen e7, hitting e2. If that's taken, we still got two pawns hanging. So although black is a piece down, that knight's not exactly the most amazing knight. We can take off that pawn, play this, and kind of win an exchange here, basically, because otherwise, if rook c2, there was bishop a4, so we're kind of skewering here, and this is just ends up black having a big advantage. Actually, black's doing really well there. Okay, so knight takes h3 is a big no-no, it seems. So we have knight takes e4, rook takes e4, bishop f4. Now queen e7 hitting the bishop on e2. The bishop moves, and now bishop takes b2. Is there time to do this? Well, with the form pawn there is. We have now white playing the tactical bishop takes d6 to try and win e4 without this check. If white plays your rook c2 here, there's bishop a4 skewer. Here, for example, queen e5, this position, bishop takes c2, and it ends up, after big forcing sequence lines, being even actually there. If we look at this again with bishop a4, if we look at it again here with rook e8, then this position, check, bishop d4 check, black's getting a big advantage there. So actually, after 23 here, this move, rook c2, it seems rook e8 is really promising, trying to light up the form pawn. If rook takes b2 here, though, rook e1, queen d3, and here bishop takes g4 is a very interesting move with this diagonal in mind. So here, for example, the disaster is bishop takes, because there's queen e4 check, distracting the queen away from f1, and the form pawn literally checkmates there. Job done, penalty scored. Okay, the ball is in the net. But after rook takes b2, rook e1 here, we have actually, in this position, we have king g1. Let's follow this. c4. Check here, c3. And this is a very, very interesting line indeed. But it ends up, alas, that white has a big advantage. So, in other words, to cut a long story short, it turns out bishop a4 is the strongest move here, not rook e8. Bishop a4 is the preferred for quality. So that is all on. So in the game, bishop takes d6 was played. That was all on the rook c2 move. But yeah, in the game, bishop takes d6, trying to drag the queen away from the rook. We have queen takes, so that's accepted. Bishop takes, so some simplification. And now the pawn majority is no good if it's fixed down, if it's blockaded. So this aims to unblockade bishop b5. If it's not, if you're not careful with this, treating friends well here, this pawn majority with rook e8, then it can be blocked with knight d2 while it's getting a small grip on the position, nullifying the pawn majority at least for a while. Any tactical attempts like rook takes e4 fell, rook e1 simply. If queen takes threatening queen g2 mate, queen d2 is sufficient here, but it's getting a big advantage. So bishop b5 is played. Rook e1, rook e8. Now, interestingly, again, form pawn tactics are beautiful here behind the scenes. White plays knight d2. There's some form pawn related tactics here. Excuse the expression, but can you see a form pawn related tactic here? If white had played queen c2, 5 seconds, black to play. Okay, queen takes d5, exploiting the pin against the rook. So if takes, then that's checkmate. And if knight c2, can you see a nice tactic here? Knight d2, can you see a nice tactic here? Okay, there's bishop d3 using the pin and win. So takes, nasty. Yep. And this is even if there's knight f1, this ending is just clearly winning because the pawn majority is absolutely winning here. So yeah, interesting stuff. So knight d2, key move to play. Now c4. Now white dare not take this. There's too many pins and wins here after knight takes c4. If knight takes c4, queen c5 is pretty nasty stuff. So for example, knight a5, you can take there, take here. Black's getting a big advantage. So can't do that. So knight f3 is played. Now c3, queen f4, and now we have an element of the position now which is not to do with strategic friends, which I believe personally neural networks like Leela and Alphazero excel in what I call waffly positions, i.e. non-technical positions where forcing moves and forcing variations are not the predominant factor, i.e. calculation is less aligned to the needs of the position. But here, once the queen's looking at f7, there's an element of forcing moves creeping in actually already. Now, if black wants to keep things simple, black could go into the endgame here with queen takes f4. And it seems this might be enough for equality. For example, bishop c4, and now rook d8 going for that d5. This position, trying to use the pawn majority in the endgame, is something which I suspect Leela might have tried if she had the same position. I haven't got the graphics cards to prove that, but this ending doesn't seem that uninteresting. For example, like this. Yeah, this is getting dangerous. You have takes, there's a2, but if knight d4 keeps a grip on things, and we end up with an even position just in this fictional scenario. So it seems queen takes f4 was interesting, at least for equality. Now queen c5 pushes for more with the passed c pawn, but there's something looking at the king, and if there's things looking at soft spots, it's going to lead to forcing variations a lot of the time. And we have knight e5 now threatening queen takes f7. There's coordination on the soft spot. One should always hide our soft spots. That's another bit of advice. Look after our friends, see how our friends coordinate with each other, and look after our soft spots. So there's some golden gems here for life in general. You see how chess is so important. Rook e7 is played, defending f7, but queen f6. Okay, so queen f6 is played. But yeah, it's actually getting very technical now after c2. Very, very technical, with things pointing at the pawn chain here. Although it looks as though this is great news with the passed pawn, it's not really. If rook takes e5 as an attempt to play like this, it looks dangerous, but bang, bishop takes g6. It's going to be a draw here, at least, just a draw. And if sorry, it's just draw by perpetual check all of a sudden. And if black dared to play this, then that's terminal for black. black's king. Well, it's going to get big advantage there. So we have c2, knight takes g6. Yeah, things are getting nasty. There's a forcing move now, a threat, key threat that has to be listened to. There's no time to queen because of queen h8 checkmate. And now we're in forcing move territory. Pardon me. And engines love this. They can calculate like 60 moves ahead. I saw literally my Stockfish 10 starting to look 60 moves ahead to work out. It's like basically a draw here. Or was it 60 ply? So it's basically a draw now by perpetual check. It's too dangerous to do anything else. If d6 happened on rook f7 here, by the way, check from the rook, and queen e5. So black has to be very careful. So d6, though, we have the pawn queening, but now Stockfish 8 has calculated it's just a draw. And this happens to a lot to Leela in tournaments recently. There's these long forcing check lines which are just drawn perpetual check. And I actually even wrote about this, like virtual fortresses, I call it, as an issue. Like the neural networks cannot sort of, they have to try and avoid the virtual fortresses. Now here it's kind of a virtual fortress because black will never have a chance to do anything. It's perpetual check, infinitum. It's interesting how it continued though. Check, 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 check. But now there was a surprise coming up actually. After this check, Alphazero played bishop e8. It doesn't change anything. The rook's pinned, so it can't be used. It's just the queen that can be used. It's the queen by itself, really, forcing the perpetual check with these two queens just gazing. Yeah, this is a bit of an Achilles heel for Leela in tournaments. We've seen a lot of perpetual check draws in recent weeks of late December and November. And October, in fact. Yeah, perpetual check seems to have been an Achilles heel generally, as well as generally opposite common bishop endings resulting in a lot of draws, even with weaker engine opponents, much weaker engine opponents. So yeah, here it's perpetual check, so I'm afraid no decisive result, but nevertheless quite a spectacular move in fairly new territory, because usually it's not played like that. Usually the idea is knight h7 and f5, not playing with the form pawn, playing a magical looking piece sacrifice. Great stuff. So I think we're seeing more of the subtleties of chess, how trump cards, strategic pluses, all coming together in a much more dynamic, interesting way, like an ant colony, like the form pawn with the dark squares of the pawn majority. It's all coming together here for that sacrifice. Very, very interesting. If you enjoyed this game video and analysis, then please click on the top left box, which should appear shortly, to become a member at chessworld.net. Play other YouTubers. You can also check out the YouTube analysis in advance from the improved menu, Learn from the Masters, YouTube order button. Comments, questions, donations, see the description. Like, share, subscribe with the notification bell. And also the Teespring store for form pawn t-shirts is in the description. Okay, thanks very much.